Hi everybody, good evening and welcome to my regular Sunday night lives, and I'm really excited to be here with you on this Sunday evening. What a beautiful day it has been where I am, with blue skies. I took my dog out for a walk with the kids and the hubby today after obviously she'd broken her paw. So it'd be really nice to see some of you come on board. If you are watching and you feel comfortable saying hi, then please do so. Remember, this is my public business page. And you know, I always say this at the start of my videos on my regular Sunday night lives, because again, I'm very much aware if you're in a narcissistic relationship or you've come out of a narcissistic relationship, sometimes obviously we want to keep things very private and we might not want to comment or say anything, and I completely understand. However, if you want to say hi, please do so to let me know that you are there and also where you're listening in from. If you're catching up on the replay, just put #replay. Again, it just gives me an idea of who's watching when and where you are watching from as well. So I hope you've all had a fantastic day. It's been a really interesting weekend for me. Had some really shocking news yesterday with regards my nephew over in America who was involved in an accident. And I won't bore you with all the details, but it certainly made me realise and, you know, sit and reflect. Hi, Carol. Sit and reflect last night about what's important, what isn't. And I did a video in my private group as well. And I just wanted to share the emotion of all of that as well. Because I think sometimes, you know, particularly for me, they see me as this coach and everything else, which is great, you know. But also it's good to cry, it's good to show emotion, and that's not a sign of weakness in my book, that's a sign of strength, because you've got to let out that emotion. Oh, excuse me. Speaking of my private group, if you're not in my free and private divorce and breakup support after narcissistic abuse group, then please either comment for the link or send me a message privately and I can send that on over to you as well. So this evening's topic is a really interesting one, and I thought long and hard about doing this one actually, because it's quite sciencey, it's a bit scientific. And sometimes people like to know this stuff and sometimes it just goes whoom, over people's head. Because you probably all know I have a science background. I was in the medical profession before I became a transformational divorce coach. And obviously I have a real passion about positive psychology, coaching psychology. I'm doing my master's, I have a postgrad in it. And also at the moment I'm actually doing a course to be certified in applied neuroscience and brain health. Because again, I have a real interest in how the brain works, the gut, how it's all interlinked with how we feel after abuse, and, you know, a real interesting, yeah, you'll love this, Carol, you really will. I've got some really nice ways of thinking about it as well, actually, to make it quite simple and easy. Because again, I obviously, when I do my research and my courses, it's pretty heavy going, the science surrounding all of it, with neuroscience as well, and neuroplasticity, which, for those who don't know what neuroplasticity is, many years ago we used to think that once the brain was formed with thoughts and habits, absolutely, Leah, of course, once I'm finished I'll go through and send you the link. We used to think that once the brain had these habits and thoughts and everything else, we couldn't actually change it. So, you know, through our childhood and beyond, it was like a fixed mindset, if you want to call it something like that. And we couldn't change then how we felt, and that was it forevermore. But what we now know through neuroplasticity is that we can change all of that. So by doing certain things like positive psychology interventions, which is things that I coach as well, we can actually change the structure of the brain. We can actually change all of that so that we can think more positively. And it can be things like gratitudes and, you know, journaling, meditation and mindfulness. So things like that, very specific, that can really start to change the brain. And this is called neuroplasticity. And we can kind of have positive and negative neuroplasticity as well, okay? So I told you it might be a bit of a science lesson for you this evening. So again, I'm going to try and keep it really simple. But anytime you've got any questions, please ask. I'm not saying I'm going to know everything about it, but I certainly have a real keen interest in how the brain works, full stop, but also how the brain changes during abuse, during narcissistic abuse as well. So there's three main areas of the brain that will change during narcissistic abuse. And you will see the title of my video was Brain Damage After Narcissistic Abuse. And that can sound quite shocking, can't it? Because I think sometimes we think of brain damage of people who maybe then can't speak, or, you know, they are not able to function anymore. But with narcissistic abuse, it does damage the brain. And there's three main parts of the brain that are associated particularly with abuse and narcissistic abuse as well. So I'm going to try and explain to you three different ones and what we can do about it and how it changes, because I think sometimes knowing things like this can really help you understand why you feel the way you do, because we very much have the thinking part of our brain and then the feeling part of our brain in our limbic system, which holds our amygdala and the hippocampus. Okay, I told you there's going to be some terminology. If you watch ER or Grey's Anatomy, you'll probably know some of these words. But again, I'm going to try and keep it really, really super simple for you to help you understand what happens in the brain during narcissistic abuse. And then whilst you're trying to heal and recover from narcissistic abuse, what happens? And I'll talk a bit about the addiction and why and how that works as well. Because, you know, have any of you ever found when you've left the narcissist, you know you shouldn't respond, you know you shouldn't retaliate, you know you shouldn't be doing all of these things, you know the best thing to do would be to walk away, to leave, to go, to not message back, but you just can't help yourself. There's something pulling you towards replying and responding, or something you can't help but saying, or checking them out on social media, or are they online on WhatsApp? All of these things, because you know you shouldn't be doing it, but something seems to just take over and you still do it. And I'd love to know if any of you have been in that situation. Yes, I was that person too, Leah. You know, when I broke up from my ex-husband, I couldn't help but check everything. And, you know, if a notification came up, I'd be looking. And then if I sent a message back, I'd just keep checking my phone as he responded. And then I kept thinking, no, stop doing that, stop doing that. But it was like something was overtaking me. And there was. It was how the brain was changing. So, during narcissistic abuse. So the majority of people who suffer with narcissistic abuse will have a form of PTSD or CPTSD. Now, I've done videos on this. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder and CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder tends to be more for those that are still within the environment, because complex PTSD is all about feeling like there's no other way out, you're trapped. And you kind of, you know, that's it. You don't know what to do. So that might be because you're tied financially. Maybe you've got the kids. You know, there are reasons, and you literally feel like there's no way out of where you are. I got diagnosed with PTSD. However, I do know I had CPTSD as well from when I was in the relationship, because I, in my wisdom, thought I would just keep my family together, and I was only working part-time, so I was reliant upon my husband financially as well. So they were kind of the two main reasons why I stayed in the relationship as long as I did, because I didn't want to break my family up. But during that time, there were changes that go on in your brain. Now, I'm going to do a really, really simple example here of, you know, you trying to understand what happens in the brain and where, okay? So if you imagine this is your brain, okay? So my fist is your brain. And this is a really simple way of doing this. And I did a course and I just thought this was a brilliant, brilliant way of doing that. So Louise says, yes, but sometimes I can't always take the higher ground and be the better person. Sometimes it's more rewarding for your own self-worth just to remind something little that will be. Yes, but let me tell you that, Louise, and I get it, believe me, I get it. By you doing that, that bit of energy that you are expending on reading and sending that message back is energy that they don't deserve. That energy should be spent on you and your healing and recovery, because you know if you send something back, you know it's going to hack them off. You know you're going to get something back. And at some stage, that something back could be something really personal. It could be something really, really digging at you that really triggers something in you. So it's best to not put yourself in that situation. I know you want to. And I advise sometimes with my clients like that is to write an email, write a message as if you were going to send it to them, but then send it to me, because I get it, you want to get it out sometimes, but you don't want them responding back as well. But I do get it, believe me, I get it, because I've been there and I know what it's like. So pretend this is your brain, okay, and it does look a little bit like your brain, doesn't it? So we can imagine this is the spinal cord as well, and then we've got the top part of the brain, which is the cerebellum. And then if I open it up like this, in here, this will be the brain stem, so this part of your wrist. So we've got the spinal cord, we've got your brain stem at the bottom of your brain like this. We've got the cerebellum that goes over here. In here, then we've got the hypothalamus and the thalamus and some of the structures there. This bit is now interesting, okay? So we're going to be talking about the hypothalamus in this video. And then also in here, this is what we call the limbic system. And in this limbic system, I told you it'd be a bit sciencey, but I hope I'm going to get you to understand it, okay? So in the limbic system, we have the hippocampus and the amygdala. Now, again, you may have heard these, and we're going to be really talking a lot about the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus, because they're the three key areas of the brain that are affected by narcissistic abuse, okay? Then over the top here, we have the parietal lobe, we've got the temporal lobe, we've got the frontal cortex here, and then the visual cortex at the back here. Now, the visual cortex, the frontal lobe here that we have is all to do with our judgment, our thinking, all of those things that, if you imagine when you're in that narcissistic relationship and all of those things are happening to you, right at the front of your brain, so the frontal lobe, what we are doing is we're kind of thinking about everything, justifying everything. It's all of those thought processes that you have got, okay? Underneath, in your amygdala, this is kind of like our emotional brain, the emotion brain, okay? So the hippocampus and the amygdala. So you imagine, and this is a really good analogy for you to think about it, of how the amygdala and hippocampus get affected, okay? So you imagine that's your brain, okay? So I told you this is going to be hopefully a simplified way of why you know the things that happen to you in your brain when you're going through narcissistic abuse. So if you imagine you get to a stage in narcissistic abuse where you literally, when you're just being abused so much, it's like a really good phrase that we use is flip your lid, okay? So you imagine, so your frontal part here of your brain, where it's all the justification and everything that you're going through, you flip your lid, okay? So you imagine when you flip your lid, what's left? We've got our amygdala and our hippocampus. This is our emotional brain, okay? This is where everything happens there. So this then, what happens? So the hippocampus will start to shrink and the amygdala will start to increase in size. And what research has shown us that when you are in a state of anxiety, when you are in states of PTSD, CPTSD, you've got those high levels of cortisol coursing around your body, and that has two effects. One, it decreases the hippocampus in size, and the other is it increases the amygdala, okay? So you imagine, you flip your lid and then you're left with your emotional brain. So this kind of then shows you're dealing with your emotions during narcissistic abuse, okay, with your amygdala and your hippocampus. So what happens then with your hippocampus, and that starts to shrink, and the hippocampus is in charge of your long and short-term memory, okay? So many of us, when we are going through narcissistic abuse, start to forget things. We start to dissociate with things. So we hear this terminology, dissociation, don't we, with narcissistic abuse. Brain fog, can't seem to focus. This is because the hippocampus will shrink in size, okay? Oh, I'm really pleased to hear it, Leah. So it will shrink in size. And what happens in response to that, the amygdala will increase in size to counteract all of that as well. So you're the amygdala is all to do with fear, emotion. So that increases in size, again, because of the excess cortisol running around your body, okay? Oh, good. I'm glad it's making some sense and everything, because I know it's quite a sciencey one, this, but those of you who know me, I love my neuroscience, and I very much work with my coaching on evidence-based things, all to do with neuroscience and everything as well. And I've been training in rapid transformational therapy, which is to do with the subconscious mind. So if you imagine when doing RTT, This part is the thinking part, and then this part is your emotional aspect. And this is the bit we need to work on to get healing. Does the narcissist brain change when they leave? Just curious if it's our brains or no, their brains are different. Absolutely, Carol. You know, the narcissist brain changes because, again, through the narcissist's childhood and beyond, that's when narcissistic personality disorder is formed. And if you look at two brains, one with someone who's got narcissistic personality disorder and one who hasn't, there's totally different areas of the brain that come into the foreplay with all of this as well. So you imagine there's your brain, and then, you know, the frontal lobe in abuse, and then all of a sudden, whew, can't cope anymore with all of the justification of things, you know, all of the abuse. So then we're left coping in the hippocampus and the amygdala. So the hippocampus will shrink because of the cortisol. The amygdala will increase in size. And that's when we start to forget things. It's our short-term memory will go. And again, I can really relate to that. And I didn't realise why, but this happens in the brain. So the hippocampus shrinks, the amygdala increases in size. Now, there are things that obviously we can do, and I'll go through some of the things that can really help with all of this. But I wanted to help you understand that when you kind of are going through all of this, the brain changes. So when I talk about neuroplasticity, this means that, yes, the brain has changed during the abuse, but it also means then we can change that back. We can start to increase all of that back by doing certain things, and I'll go through some of the things as well. Okay, so now we've got frontal part, boom, in abuse. Then we've got dealing with the hippocampus and amygdala. Then we've also got the hypothalamus here. Now, the hypothalamus will release things like oxytocin, it will release things like the opioids, and these are all neuropeptides, okay? So again, I told you a bit of a science lesson for you, and it releases that. So at the start of the video, remember when I was saying sometimes it's really hard not to react, not to respond? This is all to do with the addiction to the narcissist. Now, with the hypothalamus, okay, what happens is that there is an increase of oxytocin. Now, sometimes an increase of oxytocin is good for us because it calms us down. And you may well have heard of oxytocin with things like when women breastfeed, for instance, okay, and we release oxytocin, and that's a good calming thing. You know, when you start breastfeeding, it's kind of like, and everything, and that can be a good thing. However, that brain fog absolutely does the emotional part, left medulla of the brain, cause physical manifestation. Okay, I'm not sure whether that's a question or a statement there as well. So, but yeah, absolutely, the brain 100% changes during narcissistic abuse, okay? So we've got the hippocampus and the amygdala, like I was saying. And then also we have this addiction, which is in the hypothalamus, which is all surrounding the neuropeptides. So these things are oxytocin. But for a woman who's going through abuse, if we have too much oxytocin during that in a heightened state of anxiety, like we're walking on eggshells, again, all of the cortisol, it will have a negative effect. And what happens is, and I've spoken about addictions before and done videos on this, so basically what happens is, with the hypothalamus, that's kind of where things like anger and gratitude and all those emotions are held in the hypothalamus, okay? But the hypothalamus doesn't recognize whether they're good or bad for the body. So it's releasing all of these neuropeptides, these chemicals that go out like oxytocin, okay? And our cells in our body become used to that, okay? And again, I'm going to liken this to a drug addict just because it's probably easier for you to understand in that scenario. You imagine a drug addict, so let's just say a heroin addict, okay? He's injecting himself with heroin. Over a period of time, the body gets used to that and they become an addict, okay? And then to get the same amount of fix in that moment, they need more heroin. And it's exactly the same when you're coming out of a relationship with a narcissist. Sometimes you can feel even worse because what you're trying to do is your hypothalamus is saying, okay, I know these cells want to feel these anxieties, these feelings, the PTSD, CPTSD, these feelings of walking on eggshells, so we need to release the chemicals. And the moment they start to release the chemicals, you're going to think, oh, okay. And to release the chemicals means you need to be in that fight or flight, you're messaging, you're responding, you're reacting, so that then the hypothalamus can do what your body wants it to do to release the chemicals, and you get that feeling of, right, okay, this is what I know. and it doesn't recognize whether it's good or bad. And again, the longer it goes on, the more chemicals you are going to need to get that same fix. So sometimes, you know, you really start arguing with your ex and responding and reacting, and it feels like you're in this vicious circle all of the time. So going back again, I want to keep it really simple, just so you understand some of these brain changes that happen whilst you're going through narcissistic abuse. So again, remember, we've got our spinal cord here. So like my arm is like the spinal cord. Then we have the brain stem, okay, and the cerebellum. And then what we have in here is the hypothalamus and the thalamus and structures. Then in here we have the hippocampus and the amygdala. And then over the top here, we've got the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, the visual cortex, and then we've got the frontal cortex here. So I've been talking about the frontal cortex whilst you're enduring abuse. And then when you feel like you can't justify and everything's on top of you, boom, you flip your lid. And then we are then dealing with our emotional part of the brain. We're releasing a lot of cortisol around the body, CPTSD, PTSD, and this is when the amygdala increases inside due to more cortisol, and the hippocampus reduces inside. And the hippocampus is also to do with long and short-term memory, and the amygdala is to do with fear, and those kinds of emotions. So the amygdala increases in size, the hippocampus shrinks as well. And again, that's when you get those feelings of brain fog, dissociation, because literally, you know, the hippocampus is shrinking in size. There as well. Then in the hypothalamus, we have all of the release of things like oxytocin. You know, that's probably the main one that we talk about. And with that, it can have a calming effect on the body. But when you're going through abuse, and for women, the research has shown that this can have a negative effect on the body. So you, again, those feelings of walking on eggshells, that addiction, and you feel like you want to do everything in your power to feel like that as well. I've nicknamed my amygdala Bert. So when I feel fearful, I say, Bert's playing up again. I think some people have these chemicals when in limerence too. Their brain definitely goes haywire. Mine is mainly anxiety, fear and obsessive thoughts. And I hope you can understand, Carol, with all of that, because you've got all of those, you are very much in your feeling part of the brain with all of that. So it's kind of, we're not thinking now in the frontal lobe. We're very much in the feeling part of the brain, and the emotional aspect as well. And again, like you say, you know, the amygdala will increase in size. So the medulla increase causes brain fog, but cannot cause physical problems. Okay, so yes, stress can cause physical problems. So the cortisol running around your body can absolutely, I mean, I see this with a lot of my clients where they will have stress related illnesses. So things like fibromyalgia, there can be gut issues, which is the second brain as well. And I'm doing a lot of study on that at the moment as well. So you've got the gut issues, things like IBS, also migraines, headaches, joint pain, lots of things like that will actually cause physical symptoms as well. And a lot of this is to do with our body sometimes, our physical body will manifest itself from things that are going on in our brain, which is why it's so important of what we tell ourselves. Because if we're telling ourselves lots of negativity and fear and everything like that, then it's definitely going to have effect not just on us mentally, but absolutely on us physically as well. And so much research is coming to the fore now about positive thinking and everything else as well. So Carol, definitely as normal, I'm scientific and logical, all that goes out the window. Yes, I have, absolutely, because Carol, you're not using the frontal part of your brain in the frontal lobe. It's literally you're in your emotional aspect as well because of the abuse. So I hope that kind of explains. Fiona, I feared feeling happy. I was that used to not being. It's taken a year to, absolutely, because your hypothalamus, Fiona, is so used to a feeling like you're walking on eggshells, cortisol running around your body. You're in the feeling, emotional part of your brain and everything as well because of the cortisol. So I hope this really helps you understand that sometimes when you're thinking and feeling how you are, you've got no control over it because you've had the prolonged, insidious psychological abuse of narcissistic abuse. The brain changes. You know, it's not just a case of, and this is why I wanted to explain it like this, because I know so many of you think, just snap out of it. Why can't I be like this? because the brain has changed, you know, and you can't help feeling how you do, because over a prolonged period of time, having that psychological abuse changes how your brain functions. You have cortisol through your body, you have an increase of oxytocin going through your body as well. So you've got all of these changes going on, so you're bound to then have things going on in your brain and then physical symptoms as well. So I hope that's kind of helped you understand in this kind of brain in the palm of your hand kind of thing that you can see. And I just think it's a fantastic analogy for you to think about. You flip your lid, the frontal part of the brain, you're left with your emotional part of your brain with the amygdala and your hippocampus, that changes. And then also we've got the hypothalamus as well. So they are the three main areas of the brain that tend to be affected. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, Jan? That are affected by narcissistic abuse. Now, the beauty of neuroplasticity means we can change that, okay? That doesn't mean now you've been through abuse, that's it, you can't change it, this is you forevermore, you've lost your short-term memory, you know, you're going to have brain fog forever, that's it. That is absolutely not the case, okay? But you have to be proactive in all of this as well, okay? It's not just suddenly going to change overnight. You have to be proactive in this. So what can you do? What can you do then to start to change the brain back again and increase the size of your hippocampus, shrink the size of your amygdala, stop all of the oxytocin and the fight or flight feeling all of the time in your body? So what can you do with that? It's a number of things that you can do. So this is what I coach a lot of as well with the positive psychology interventions. So things like mindfulness or meditation, you know, again, really, really important. The more you can decrease those levels of cortisol in your body, the more effects you are going to have on your hippocampus and your amygdala there as well. Okay, really, really important. So mindfulness and meditation. Random acts of kindness again, okay, so counteracting that whole kind of feeling of not being in control. And again, if you think about cognitive dissonance and trauma bonding, this is again this area in your brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus, that's going to have a huge factor, because again, the trauma bonding to somebody is in this area here. We start to make excuses for them, because what happens in our brain is we can't cope in this part of actually thinking they could be doing this to us. So we kind of then start to go in the feeling and emotional part, and we start to justify why they're doing, and we get that trauma bonding. And the cognitive dissonance as well. So cognitive dissonance is like your partner saying one thing to you. Part of you is thinking, that can't be right. But the other part is thinking, but then he's my husband, or he's my wife, or she's my wife, so that must be right. So you are left with two opposing opinions of the same thing. And your brain is kind of like, oh, I don't know what to think. And often then it will go here and it will then think, well, they're my husband or they're my wife, so I'm sure it's, and then you start to give reasons and excuses for all of that, because your brain literally can't cope with the reality of it, because you've had all of this abuse and we've flipped our lid. So what we start to do is we then start to think about, oh my goodness, so, you know, there was reasons for that, to cope with it as well. So trauma bonding and cognitive dissonance, very much a part of this aspect of the brain as well, of the emotional and feeling aspect as well, not thinking aspect, which is at the frontal part, the frontal lobe of your brain then as well. Okay, so we've got mindfulness and meditation, we've got random acts of kindness as well. Oh, great, glad to hear it, Jan. The other thing that you can get quite good results with, and that's coming through, is something called EMDR, and this is to do with your rapid eye movement, and that can help with things like PTSD as well. However, for me personally, I think you know, I can't wait obviously to be implementing RTT with my clients, because I kind of really feel like RTT is all to do with these aspects of the brain, subconscious mind, the thinking, the feeling aspect as well, because so many of my clients, they really think here, so 10% in our conscious mind, but in our subconscious mind is where our belief systems are held, and this is the kind of feeling aspect. So we want to kind of understand in the frontal lobe, and this is where we think, but then we also want in the feeling aspect, the emotional aspect of the brain as well. We need to have that connection, because it's no good you thinking you can recover, thinking you know how to do that. Oh, I'm so pleased to hear that, Fiona. Oh, brilliant. fantastic. I'm so happy for you with the RTT ladies. I really, really am. You know, so what we want to do is have that connection between the thinking part and the feeling part, because you can see here the feeling part is what we need to work on, because then we will have this knock-on effect then, so that you can get back to thinking and feeling exactly the same together. So RTT is absolutely, for me, a game changer in all of this. The positive psychology aspect as well with the interventions, like I was saying, mindfulness and meditation, gratitudes, again, 21 days, 3 different gratitudes, starts to rewire the brain. At the moment, we have all these negative neural pathways that are firing in your brain, releasing cortisol as well, and these messages that are firing around. We want to change all of that. We want more positivity, and the more we do that, the more we're going to dial down the cortisol in our body, which is not good for us as well. And then what we can start to do is start to change the neuroplasticity of our brain, so we can start to get back to where we were beforehand. And the beauty of all of this as well is, again, and I've always said this about narcissistic abuse, as horrible as it is, it's an opportunity and a catalyst for you to look at everything else in your life as well, to create a blueprint for you not to do now, but to move forward. So RTT, Charlie, is something called rapid transformational therapy, which I've been recently training in. It's a game changer for me. It really, really is. Really excited to implement it with my clients. Already been doing family and friends as well. So it's just phenomenal, because what it does is it regresses clients back and people back to times in their life where they've created these negative beliefs, and because it's in hypnosis, it taps into the subconscious mind. So it's not just the conscious mind, it's the subconscious mind. And then the meaning you have attached to these events, very often about not feeling good enough, not worthy, not lovable, we can't change those events, but we can change the meaning you've attached to those events, because you're maybe no longer that child that had those obviously those feelings. And also the great thing about RTT, because it can tap into the brain when we help rewire with the neuroplasticity, it can cover a whole host of things as well: stopping smoking, losing weight, fertility, business, wealth, all kinds of things as well. So it's a really, really powerful tool to implement, and really, really excited about implementing it into my business. I really, really am as well. Game changer therapy. It really, really is. It's phenomenal. It really is. So for me, there's that. Then, like I say, the interventions that you can do: journaling, gratitudes, mindfulness, meditation, random acts of kindness. So things that are going to really start to increase the positive neural pathways in your brain and decrease the amount of cortisol. And what can happen is you can change your brain back again. You know what? Our human body is absolutely phenomenal. It really, really is. And, you know, you can be proactive in all of this. I mean, I see this a lot where sadly people stay stuck. They just stay exactly where they are following narcissistic abuse. And again, I volunteer at my local domestic abuse charity as well. And, you know, it's about people recognizing that it's not your fault. You know, there's changes that have happened, but there are things that we can do to help you, to really help change all of that back. And this is where we call it neuroplasticity. So we're changing and rewiring. That's why I've kind of changed my taglines for my videos and my lives now to rewire, transform and thrive, because it is all about rewiring your brain. And I think this is a really important concept to recognize, you know. And I know there's a lot of coaches out there, counsellors out there, therapists out there. And again, I've always said, if you are going to see somebody after narcissistic abuse, you have to be sure they know what they are talking about. Because if they don't, they can do more damage. And I've seen people come to me who've invested thousands actually in other coaches and counsellors. And because they've not had a knowledge of narcissistic abuse, it's actually been really counterproductive, and they've come to me in a worse state than actually when they even started. Because again, we have this addiction, and remember what happens with addiction is we need more of it in the long run to get that same fix. So what we want to do is stop the addiction. And to stop the addiction is where the no contact and extreme modified contact comes in. As hard as that is, it's like going cold turkey, but you have to do that. If you don't do that, the hypothalamus is going to keep going with the oxytocin and everything else as well, and you are going to stay addicted. And when you stay addicted, what happens is you are going to respond. Okay, so we've got the addiction going on. you're going to respond. When you respond and get the messages back, you're going to feel even more anxious, hypervigilant, you know, all of these symptoms of CPTSD, PTSD. What's going to happen in the limbic system, in your amygdala and your hippocampus? Hippocampus is going to shrink, and then the amygdala is going to increase in size. So Charlie, something I could really do with to feel myself again, even after 2 years of separation, it's not long enough. Absolutely. And there's so many things, and this is, you know, and this is why I'm always researching and learning, because again, I want to find things that help people accelerate their healing. You know, it took me long enough to actually realize that I'd been abused and then try to recover. So all the stuff that I coach, it's all to do with things that I did that didn't work, and I did a lot of them, believe me. And then all the things that I've learned about, you know, the neuroscience of the brain behind it. And this is why the RTT and the positive psychology really gel well together for me, because the RTT is kind of about the past, resetting all of that, and the positive psychology is kind of about the future, creating a blueprint then to move forward. And sort of sat in the middle is the understanding, the neuroscience, the kind of transformation aspect of all of this as well, and getting to know, to understand, because, you know, ultimately there are changes that are going on, you know, and it's fine to embrace all of that and understand all of that, but only if you do something with it. You know, once you have this knowledge, it's all about you then taking back some of your power and understanding, well, how do I change all of that? Well, there's lots of things that you can implement. You know, the first is absolutely no contact, extreme modified contact. It is so important to your healing, everybody. I cannot even begin to tell you how much as well. In the module of my planner program, actually, module 4, there's a whole section about this, about no contact, how to implement no contact and extreme modified contact, lots of tips and suggestions on how you can do this like a boss, you know, because that is so important to your recovery as well. You know, and if you are engaging in messaging and back and forth with your ex, you are severely slowing your healing down. You know, severely slowing your healing, it's still affecting your brain, you're keeping the addiction going, you're keeping the shrinkage of your hippocampus and, you know, increase in size of your amygdala. And what that will do is, again, you will have short-term memory where you can't think, and you've got this brain fog going on all of the time, this dissociation, and you're wondering why, and you just think it's because of the abuse, and then you start blaming yourself, and that inner critic comes out, and you're like, pull myself together, but you can't help it because your brain has changed in all of this as well. So I hope that's kind of helped you maybe understand a little bit about what goes on in the brain when you're going through narcissistic abuse. So 3 main areas of the brain that we need to think about here. So we've got this limbic system here, which is where the amygdala and the hippocampus are as well, so the emotional aspect of your brain. And then we've also got the hypothalamus, okay, which is where the addiction will happen, so where the oxytocin, the neuropeptides, and that's where we get addicted to all of that as well. So they're the 3 main areas of the brain that we need to work on, and a lot of that revolves around reducing the amount of cortisol going in our body, and to really help do that is no contact, extreme modified contact, and then strategies then of really helping us focus on self-love, on healing ourselves, so things like meditations, mindfulness, whatever works for you in that scenario. We've also got things like gratitudes, journaling, random acts of kindness, you know, having someone like myself, you know, really help you really accelerate your healing in all of this as well. Gaining that understanding, you know, and like I say, I want to thanks Carol, I want you to help rewire your brain, okay? We can change your brain. Neuroplasticity is so exciting in the science world, it really is. You know, the brain is fascinating. There's so much we can do. We are our worst critic. The stuff we say to ourselves, and I will often say, oh, brilliant, Serena. I will often say to my clients, you know, or if they say things like, this is going to happen, or, you know, and it's all negative. The brain is so powerful. It will do what we tell it to do. So if we're telling our brain we're going to feel like this, guess what? Your brain thinks, okay, I'll let you feel like that then, and it will make you do all of that. So Louise, I think though others can put an expectation on you on time that it takes to recover from such long time horrendous abuse that they think they should be moving on, and we all are, but it's not like a normal breakup. Absolutely not. I have come such a long way and I'm so proud of myself, but the trauma of some things will take longer to heal. Absolutely. And this is where, you know, everybody's journey is different and different timescales, and also the environment that you are in. But there are so many things that you can do to really accelerate your healing with all of that as well, Louise. And it's setting up those strategies in place with all of that, one by one by one by one, to really put you right at the center of your healing. And this is why a lot of what I teach is about self-love, self-esteem. You are good enough, you are worthy, you are lovable, because so many of us that end up in relationships with a narcissist, we have feelings of not being good enough. We are a magnet to a narcissist, you know, and like you say, breaking up from a narcissist is not like any other breakup, but we don't need to justify that to other people, but we feel like we do because we don't feel good enough. So it all keeps coming back to us. Start with us, self-love. All of those things are really, really going to help, obviously, with your healing. What if you can't visualize? I have aphantasia, as I can't picture anything in my mind. Has that actually been diagnosed as well, Mel? You know, have you been to see somebody to get that diagnosed? Because again, you know, I would say with that is, I'd love to have a session with you or something, because for somebody who can't visualize, why can't you visualize? What is it that's stopping you from visualizing as such? And that's really, really interesting that you say you can't picture anything in your mind, because is that because people aren't asking you the right questions, you know, or are there other ways that you can do that as well? Because when you say you can't visualize, can you remember, if I said to you, can you remember what you had for your tea, for instance, what something will come into your mind if I say to you, what have you had for your tea? Or do you just say, I can't remember, I don't know, you know? And that's really, really interesting to see. So, you know, I would question that just from a scientific perspective. It's really interesting to me that you say that. So my question would be, can you remember what you had for your tea? And if you can picture what you had for your tea, because our brain works in pictures as well, then I would say, you know, there's something to work with. So Serena, unfortunately my mum is a narc. It took until I was 31 to find out. Now I'm divorcing a narc, bloody surrounded by them. Absolutely, Serena. And you know what? Your mum being a narc suggests to me you're probably a codependent then as well, because then you found yourself in a relationship with a narcissist. It's difficult when you know your mum is, because potentially you're going to have contact with her. It's knowing your boundaries. It's knowing exactly how you can stay safe. That's the priority. You, yourself. Number one priority in all of this as well. But do you know what, Serena? This is now an opportunity for you at 31 to now you are going to live the rest of your life knowledgeable, knowing more about yourself than you've ever known before, and you are going to live a most amazing life. And I don't know whether you have children or not, but if you don't, then when you do, you're going to have amazing insight. And if you do, you are going to be teaching them the most amazing things about self-love, self-respect, self-confidence, self-esteem. And you know what? When I divorced my ex-husband, I was 36. So you know what? You're 5 years ahead of the game of me. You really are. So, you know, hats off to you and well done as well. So I can't remember, but I can't see anything. Then you can remember, but I can't see anything. Okay, so if you remember, are you remembering in words? And again, I would question all of this because, you know, and again, it's a fascinating thing there, Mel, but again, I would question, because if you can remember, your brain will think in pictures with that as well, not just a word. So very, very interesting. So I hope that really, really helped you all understand a little bit about how the brain functions during narcissistic abuse. I've been kind of putting off doing this video for a while because it's quite techie, isn't it? It's quite scientific. Some people might find it fascinating, others might think, I don't really want to know any of that. But I felt it was necessary to do so that hopefully you can be a little bit kinder to yourself, show yourself some more self-compassion, because the brain does change when you are going through narcissistic abuse. It does change, but the beauty of it changing means that it can change back, and there are things that you can do. So rather than just thinking, that's it, this is me, this is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life, it isn't. You can absolutely make positive changes. And remember, the brain is incredible. What we tell our brain, it will do. And the beauty of that is, at the moment, what is familiar to your brain is feeling how you are. So you need to make how you're feeling unfamiliar. And what we want to make from the unfamiliar is in feeling great and positive and looking forward to life and excited. That's what we need to change to familiar. So we need to switch them over as well. And again, that is a process and little steps forward each day doing all of that. So I hope that really, really helped. Remember, if you're not in my group as well, oh, thank you, Carol. Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a challenging weekend, to say the least. But you know what? I just feel so grateful to be here as well. Again, it makes you think about all the things that you're grateful for in your life. And I feel very grateful to be here sharing what I can to help you guys heal and recover as much as you can. Because to me, again, I have been where you all are, literally at rock bottom. Okay, you know, and I've always said this, the person you see now was not who I was 9 years ago at all. I wish I had a camera that went round with me, because I know some of you probably look and think, oh, I wish I could be like Caroline. She's so confident now. She's so this now. She seems so together and da-da-da and everything else. I was not 9 years ago. You know, I was the previous 9 years beforehand, before I got married. Well, I got married 14 years before that. That was me before, but I completely lost myself. So I know I had changes in my brain, but I know I am happier than I ever have been. That doesn't mean I walk around with a big smile on my face all of the time, okay? You have to have light and dark together, because then you can appreciate everything too. So if you're not in my private group, I know a couple of you have commented, I will go back and send you the link, Divorce and Breakup Support After Narcissistic Abuse as well. And again, any questions you have, you know, if you want to go back and watch, because it's quite a heavy video, isn't it? A heavy live this evening. Please do so. Please ask. Anytime anyone wants to talk to me, please feel free to drop me a message through my Facebook page. You know, more than happy to try and help as much as I possibly can as well. And, you know, things happen in your life, and you going through all of this, I think it's so important for you to be educated about all of this, but to have that level of understanding that you know it isn't your fault. You know, every single person I have coached are the most beautiful souls, inside and out, with so many gifts to give. Okay, and ultimately we just need to make some shifts here and there and create an environment that is conducive to your healing, and there's lots of things you can do for that. So again, if anyone ever wants to talk about any one-to-one coaching with me, more than happy to have a chat about that as well. So take care, everybody. I hope you all have a fantastic week. The weather's looking pretty good, actually, certainly in the UK, where I am in the Midlands for the next week, which is great because my son has got Duke of Edinburgh next weekend and he's camping for 2 nights, 3 days. So that looks good. So Louise, one last question, and that's why I don't worry about how long it takes me, as I look to you and know it took you a long time too. So absolutely, Louise, too right. Every little step, suddenly a month you might have cried 10 times a month instead of 20 times a month. And you know what? Celebrate how far you have come. It's not always where you're going. Don't keep focusing on the end goal. Look how far you've come and everything as well. So you should be so proud of yourself. You really, really should. 100%. So take care, everybody. Have a fabulous, fabulous week. And I'll be back again next Sunday night with another live for you as well. And again, I shall be in my group all week. So again, if you're not in my group, get on in there. And I will see you next Sunday night. Bye, everyone.